Sarah Mitchell stood at the edge of the dusty road, clutching her infant daughter against her chest as the stagecoach disappeared into the distance. At 26, she carried herself with the careful stillness of someone who had learned to make themselves small to avoid drawing attention that might bring pain. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, and her simple gray dress hung loose on her thin frame. The baby in her arms whimpered softly, and Sarah's grip tightened protectively. Little Emma was barely 3 months old, born into circumstances that Sarah tried not to think about. A constant reminder of trauma that had shattered her world and left her feeling broken beyond repair. She had come to Clearwater Valley because it was far from everything she'd known. Far from the whispers and the knowing looks. A woman at the mission in Denver had told her about opportunities for domestic work on the frontier, where questions weren't asked and pasts could be left behind. A wagon approached from the direction of town, driven by a man who appeared to be in his late 30s. He had the weathered look of someone who spent his days working under the sun, with gentle brown eyes and an unhurried manner that suggested patience and quiet strength. "Ma'am," he said, touching his hat as he drew the wagon to a stop. "I'm Daniel Garrett. Are you the woman Mrs. Patterson sent word about? Looking for work?" Sarah nodded, unable to find her voice. She had grown so used to expecting the worst from every encounter that kindness felt foreign and potentially dangerous. "I run the Double G Ranch about 5 miles from here," Daniel continued, his voice carefully neutral. "I'm in need of someone to help with household duties. The pay isn't much, but there's a small cabin on the property, and you're welcome to bring your little one." Sarah finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mr. Garrett, I should tell you, I have a baby and I'm not married." Daniel's expression didn't change. "Ma'am, what matters to me is whether you're willing to work hard and treat my home with respect. The rest is your business." As they rode toward the ranch, Sarah held Emma close, marveling at Daniel's matter-of-fact acceptance. He didn't pry, didn't ask questions about her circumstances, and didn't make assumptions about her character based on her unmarried status. The ranch was modest, but well-maintained, with a main house that clearly needed a woman's touch and a small but comfortable cabin situated a respectful distance away. Daniel helped Sarah down from the wagon, being careful not to touch her unnecessarily, something she noticed and appreciated. "The cabin has everything you'll need," Daniel said, setting her small bag on the porch. "Take today to settle in. We can discuss duties and expectations tomorrow." That first night, as Sarah tried to quiet Emma's crying in their new surroundings, she heard gentle footsteps on the cabin's porch. She tensed, memories of violence making her heart race, but Daniel's voice came through the door, calm and reassuring. "Ma'am, I brought some milk and fresh bread. I'll just leave them on the step." She heard his footsteps retreating and waited several minutes before opening the door to retrieve the food. The simple kindness of the gesture brought tears to her eyes. Over the following weeks, Sarah settled into a routine of cooking and cleaning for Daniel while caring for Emma. Daniel proved to be a man of few words but consistent kindness. He never asked about Emma's father, never pried into Sarah's past, and always maintained a respectful distance that allowed Sarah to feel safe. But Emma was a different story. The baby seemed to sense Daniel's gentle nature, and despite Sarah's protective instincts, Emma would often stop crying when Daniel was near, reaching toward him with tiny hands as if sensing his inherent goodness. One evening, Sarah was struggling with Emma, who had been fussy all day. The baby's cries filled the small cabin, and Sarah felt overwhelmed by exhaustion and the weight of caring for a child while battling her own emotional wounds. A soft knock came at the door, and Daniel's voice called quietly, "Sarah, is everything all right?" "She won't stop crying," Sarah said through the door, her voice breaking with fatigue and frustration. "I don't know what's wrong." "May I help?" Daniel asked gently. Sarah opened the door, tears streaming down her face. "I don't know what to do. She's been like this for hours." Daniel stepped into the cabin, his movements slow and deliberate to avoid startling Sarah. "Sometimes babies just need a different touch," he said softly. "Would you mind if I tried?" Sarah looked at Daniel, then at Emma, who was red-faced from crying. Something in Daniel's expression, a combination of genuine concern and practiced patience, made her nod. Daniel reached for Emma with experienced hands, and Sarah automatically stepped back, whispering, "Don't touch me, I'm broken." Daniel paused, his hands still extended toward the baby, but his eyes met Sarah's with profound understanding. He said nothing in response to her whispered plea, recognizing that words would be inadequate and possibly intrusive. Instead, he simply nodded and gently lifted Emma from Sarah's arms. What happened next was like watching magic. Daniel held Emma against his chest, swaying gently as he hummed a soft, wordless tune. Within minutes, the baby's cries subsided, and she settled against Daniel's shoulder with a contented sigh. Sarah watched in amazement as this strong, weathered man rocked her daughter with the tenderness of someone who clearly understood babies. His large hands supported Emma's tiny body with perfect care, and his humming created a soothing rhythm that seemed to calm not just the baby, but something in Sarah's own wounded heart. "How did you—" Sarah began, then stopped. "I had a daughter once," Daniel said quietly, still swaying with Emma. "Long time ago. She and her mother died from fever when she was about Emma's age." Sarah felt something shift inside her chest. This man's gentleness with Emma wasn't just natural kindness. It came from his own experience with loss and love. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "It was a long time ago," Daniel repeated, "but I remember how to quiet a fussy baby." As the weeks passed, this scene repeated itself several times. Whenever Emma was inconsolable and Sarah felt overwhelmed, Daniel would appear with his quiet presence and gentle hands, rocking the baby until she slept. He never overstepped boundaries with Sarah, never tried to touch her or comfort her directly, understanding instinctively that she needed space and time to heal. But his care for Emma spoke to something deeper. Through his actions rather than words, Daniel showed Sarah that goodness still existed in the world, that there were men who could be trusted with the most precious things. One evening, as Daniel rocked Emma to sleep on the cabin's small porch while Sarah prepared dinner, she found herself studying his profile in the golden hour light. There was something infinitely peaceful about watching this strong man cradling her daughter, humming softly as Emma's eyes drooped closed. "Daniel," Sarah said quietly, "why are you so kind to us?" Daniel considered the question for a long moment before answering. "Because everyone deserves kindness, Sarah, especially those who've forgotten what it feels like." Sarah felt tears gathering in her eyes. "I am broken, though. What happened to me? It changed something inside me. I don't know if I'll ever be whole again." Daniel looked at her with gentle wisdom. "Sarah, broken things can still be beautiful. And sometimes they're stronger in the broken places, once they've had time to heal properly." As autumn approached, Sarah realized that something had indeed begun to heal inside her. Daniel's patient presence, his care for Emma, and his respect for Sarah's boundaries had created a space where she could begin to remember who she had been before trauma redefined her. She was still careful, still carried the scars of what had been done to her. But Emma was thriving under the combined care of her mother and this gentle man who had become an unexpected guardian angel in their lives. One evening, as Daniel handed a sleeping Emma back to Sarah, their hands brushed accidentally. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Sarah didn't flinch away. Instead, she looked into Daniel's eyes and saw nothing but respect, kindness, and perhaps the beginning of something that felt like hope. "Thank you," she whispered, and they both understood she meant for far more than just helping with the baby. Daniel nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. "You're both welcome here, Sarah, for as long as you need." As Sarah carried Emma into the cabin that had become their sanctuary, she realized that healing wasn't always about forgetting the past or pretending trauma hadn't happened. Sometimes it was about finding people who could see your worth even when you felt worthless, who could offer kindness without expecting anything in return, and who understood that the most profound healing happens not through words, but through simple, consistent acts of love.